Nate Cabot. I'm the Assistant City Administrator at the City of Chaska. We've got a few partners in this thing. So what you've entered here, just to verify that you're in the right place, I suppose, is the Chaska Business Roundtable Zoom meeting. And this is something that's a joint effort. The City of Chaska is involved with, me doing that, but then we also have the Carver County CDA with Elise Durbin, who's the Community Development Director there, the Chaska Downtown Business Alliance. Jen Angel is their administrator, and Dan Keyport is the president. And the Southwest Metro Chamber with Darren Noble, who's the new executive director there, and Kelly Darcourt, the event and program manager, who's been helping with promoting this event to you all. Before I go much further, this is something that we're wanting to record so that we can share it with folks who maybe weren't able to join today. So Kevin Wright is the city's communications director. He's going to press the record button. Just want to make you aware that that's the case. So watch your language. So going forward, I want to talk about the intent. I'll give a little bit of a city update, and then we'll hand it off to our keynote speaker today, who is Kylle Jordan from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. Kylle is a partner that the city works with quite frequently on the industrial side, getting loans and grants and things to help with industrial expansion in the community. But she has fashioned herself into an expert on things COVID business related over the last few weeks here to be able to help people with their questions. So the intent of this, and the reason that we did this, and we're on our second one now, the first one was April 30th, was to open a dialogue and to convene the business community. We want to connect businesses with resources, create an opportunity to share, for peer learning, and learn from the insights of the business community. And that's the city and our partners here, wanting to hear from you and understand where your thoughts are at, the places that you're looking for assistance on, so we can try and respond. We want to think about ways to support the businesses, and we're interested to hear your ideas. So just so you're aware, there will be a Q&A at the end after Kylle shares her presentation. There'll be an opportunity for you all to pick her brain or offer up your ideas, and I certainly encourage you to be a part of that as well. Give a little bit of update on the City of Chaska and what we've been up to. Since before the shutdowns occurred, we established an emergency operations center at our fire department. And at that time, we were meeting on a daily basis and on weekends. And as things began to close down and we started to figure out the new rhythm of things, we've now been meeting Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So they're usually a couple hours for each one to talk about what's going on in the community, what's pertinent to the city and keeping our operations. And the mission of that has really been around protecting employees and the public in order to provide ongoing core services of the city to the public. And we feel like we've largely been able to do that. Most things that people would expect to be able to accomplish at City Hall are still being able to be accomplished today, despite the fact that many of our employees are working remotely from home and off-site. There are a few key staff that do report to City Hall, still now mainly revolving around building permits and being able to make sure that we can issue those. Public Works and our utilities staff are taking social distancing measures. They have some shift differentiation going on to create separation there. And they utilize masks, and they're working closely together. Our police department and fire department have some split shifts that they're doing in different ways, but the intent there is to prevent sort of cross-contamination. So we basically have work teams that have been established, and so those folks are, when they're on shift, are the only people that they're seeing. Last thing we want to do is have one police officer come back from a call and have been in contact with someone with COVID, and then bring it back and have everyone on a quarantine, not being able to be in the field. So that's the intent of our approach with that. Parks and Recreation, as I think probably most of you are aware, the community center is closed. We are developing reopening plans, and I think have a lot of measures in place to hopefully help people feel welcome and safe when that is allowed to occur. So we've got our eyes on that, and we do have plans for that to happen. Summer programming is canceled. We're developing programming that will work within the social distancing guidelines for the summer, so people will continue to see more and more of that come out. And our Parks and Rec staff have been very actively involved in leading the Chaska Cares initiative, which I'll touch on here in a little bit. Utilities, we have ceased our shutoffs. We're not applying penalties for late payments at this time, recognizing that a lot of folks are under economic pressure and trying to make ends meet. So try to provide a little bit of a relief on that end. We expect this general approach that we're taking to continue at least through the governor's stay safe orders. We're continually reviewing that, and we're recognizing that there are other communities that are approaching it in different ways. So we're trying to continue to understand that environment, and the situation, I would say, continues to be fluid as it has been. Chaska Cares, I do want to touch on that. That's an initiative that our Parks and Rec staff, and Kevin Wright has been very involved in it as well. Trying to do some things that can build community, bring people together, build connections during this time, recognizing that that's been one of the most difficult things to accomplish with people stuck at home, not being able to go to work, not being able to sort of follow their typical routine that they're used to and enjoy. So we've done things like our birthday patrol. We've gone well over 250 birthday patrols at this point, where kids and I suppose children at heart can request the fire department and the police department to do a drive-by, and they'll flash their lights and honk their horns a little bit to congratulate people and wish them a happy birthday. We've collected coloring books that were donated to provide to our senior care facilities so that those folks have some form of entertainment. Coordinated a food drive sponsored by Michael's Foods, brought food directly to the homes of some folks that have needs or maybe unable to get out and get to that food drive that was hosted at the Chaska High School. We've been hosting mask drives and collecting those. My estimate is we've probably collected something between 4,000 to 5,000 masks at this time. We've been distributing those to our assisted living facilities, some of our lower income neighborhoods, and they're also available for businesses as well. So anyone who's looking to get masks, and these are the cloth masks that have been homemade, could request one from me if you want, or access through Chaska Cares, and that would be chaskacares@chaskamn.com. Just tell us what you need, and we will try to meet that for you. Continue to get a lot of masks that are doing it. Interestingly, some of the folks in our assisted living and 65 plus communities are avid sewers, and so they've been supplying us with quite a number of masks. We also got a very large donation from MyPillow, which was extremely generous in helping us meet our goals there. One other thing that Chaska Cares is going to be, well, a couple things, is going to be starting to pursue a little bit more. We are planning to do something for the high school graduation ceremony to build upon that. That's on June 5th. So we'll be doing some things like putting off our public alert sirens, encouraging other folks to make noise. There's gonna be 20 seconds of, I don't know exactly how we're billing it, maybe Kevin can chime in, but 20 seconds of yelling and making noise to acknowledge the class of 2020 through that effort. We'll also do sort of like the birthday patrols or the Easter Bunny parade that we did. We'll have the Hawk on a bus. We'll have some of the class leaders like the valedictorians on there, school principal on some buses or fire trucks and police cars, and we'll go around the community and try to go by as many of the seniors' homes as we can, or get within a few blocks of them so they can have that acknowledgement on that route. Another thing that we're doing is looking at putting forward a campaign, so sort of a public awareness type campaign that would involve some lawn signs and would say, because I care, I wear a mask, or because I care, I stay home if I'm sick, because I care, I wash my hands, and try to promote some of those public health measures that folks can be taking to not only protect themselves, but their neighbors. And I think that could be something that, if the business community is interested in participating, and we'd love to have that partnership and get as many people involved in trying to promote these best practices and getting people, feeling safer as things continue to open up. With that, I guess I would turn it over to Elise Durbin at the CDA if you've got any updates that you want to provide, Elise.
At this time, I don't have anything. I'll let Kyle get going here in a second. I think, the CDA's website has a variety of different links to, critical resources for businesses that you can might be of interest to you, from different funding sources to, as we'll talk about today, safely reopening and some of the best practices that you'll hear about. So I would encourage you to visit the CDA's website, and under the news section, there's a variety of links, and I'll find the link and put it in the chat box for you, so you can just copy and paste from there. But with that, I turn it back to Nate, and we'll go from there.
As you were chatting, Lisa, I think I realized that I failed to mention the list of resources that I sent out with some of the invites that I made. And I don't know that necessarily all of you would have gotten that or not, but we did put a list, and this was in response to our first business roundtable. A lot of people were asking about guidelines, to reopen, which is why we brought Kylle Jordan in. And also about how do I access supplies like cleaning supplies and masks and those various items. So we did put together a list of vendors, and these are vendors that the city is either actively purchasing things from now and had success doing that, or other folks that I've had direct conversations with, or others amongst our partners have had conversations with, and they have said, yes, please provide my information. I'd love to help out. So we do have that list available, and some of you may have gotten that. If you didn't, feel free to email me. I've got my email in the comments, the group chat section of this, or Chaska Cares. You can email that as well, which I mentioned earlier. So with that, I will now turn it over to Kylle Jordan. Kylle, like I said before, is a big partner of the city already in supporting our business growth and industrial development in particular. She comes from Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, and is here today to talk about some of the state guidelines and guidance that's being provided for businesses to plan for reopening.
Thanks, Nate. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you're all staying, safe and healthy. I'm here today, obviously, as a representative from DEED, as Nate mentioned. A couple disclaimers. First and foremost, everything I'm talking about today is as of today. Information is changing all the time, as you probably know. Just as of yesterday, a number of new guidelines came out from the governor. So please know this information could change at any time. Further, my normal role with DEED is basically I am a regional business development director. So I work, as Nate mentioned, with cities like Chaska to work with business, keep them, grow them, attract new business to the state. So that has changed a little bit in these past couple months, as we at DEED have been a pretty major contributor to moving things forward through this pandemic. Now, that means, for example, we have traditionally been the Office of Unemployment for the state of Minnesota. So I'm happy to answer questions if there's questions related to unemployment. We are also, a business lending type of agency. So we had a small business emergency loan available about a month ago. That was something that we were also getting out to talk to folks about. Now we're really moving more into the reopening guidelines. So just in terms of what that looks like, I did share a link here at the top of the chat, which is for our DEED website on safe work. So if you were interested in looking at that, that's just mn.gov/DEED/safe-work. It looks a little bit longer here in the chat just because it's a shorter URL when you go into an actual browser. But basically what that document or what that page does is it's updated constantly. So we updated it yesterday with some of the new guidelines for businesses such as restaurants and personal care. But it does also have information there. For example, we're still getting questions about businesses who feel that they should be on the critical sectors list. So that page has the information for emailing our critical sectors team. Deed is not personally managing that list. It's a group of folks, kind of a roundtable, if you will, that is reviewing those requests. And they continue to do that. It's been going on for about a month. Further to that, there's also information there for non-critical sectors who are allowed to be open. So that's, you know, certain office type environments and others. With that, if you are a non-critical sector who is allowed to be open, one thing to be aware of is that you are required to have a safety plan, and that plan needs to be posted. It needs to be shared with employees, and you know, if those employees are uncomfortable with what they're seeing in there, they do have the ability to let you know as the employer that they don't feel safe. Further to that, the Office of Labor and Industry, DLI, they work very closely with OSHA, and if you were seeking some sort of a guidance on, you know, whether or not your plan was safe enough, the OSHA is doing some consultations at this time. Worth noting, you know, tens of thousands of businesses here in the state, so it may not be a very quick turnaround, but if that is a concern, they are offering that service right now. DEED is also working collaboratively with other agencies to put forward these reopening guidelines. So as you likely saw yesterday, the first guidelines to come out regarding restaurants and bars, et cetera, are really around outdoor dining. So there's specific guidelines at that website. Kevin, I don't know if you're able to share the screen, but there's bullet points there that include, you know, exact capacity. That's related to fire code capacity. So, you know, 25% or 50%, whatever the case may be. It's related to your fire code. As well as specifics for how, you know, employees should be caring for themselves and others, as well as when folks come to visit your place of business, what they need to be doing. Not least of which, for example, is making sure that they have a reservation. We're really not allowing walk-ups for personal care or for restaurants starting June 1. So just in terms of, you know, what comes after that, we've started to look at, you know, we get a lot of questions about gyms, for example. Why can't a gym be open? One of the reasons that, you know, we're really looking at is in an environment like that, especially an indoor location, you are going to be very active. You're breathing heavier. Those droplets are going to stay in the air for longer. So we really need to get some better guidance around that. More likely we'll see some, you know, outdoor type recreation opening up first, you know, yoga in the park or whatever that looks like. So I guess we're going to hope for not a lot of rain this summer, since that's kind of our option is outdoors at this point. But going forward, all that to say, we are working in collaboration with various organizations, various departments, as well as the business community to develop the guidelines going forward. So just in terms of, that's kind of a basic background, and I imagine there's a lot of questions. So I'm happy to start responding to those, just because I think you know, all of you have the ability to go to this website, and it is not necessarily comprehensive. So I'm happy to take your questions, and if I'm not able to answer them right now, I can absolutely take them up to leadership. That is one unfortunate piece as well. I'm not a decision maker, but I do have a little bit more of a direct line to the folks who are making these decisions to hopefully get answers for you in the business community. I don't know if the chat function is the best way to do that, or Q&A, or if folks have, you know, starter questions. I'm happy to field what I can.
Yeah, I think people should feel free just to unmute and chime in. You know, we don't have to be super formal here. If you prefer the chat function, that's fine. Also, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the reactions piece. You could, you know, give there's a couple, I don't know, emojis there. You could raise one of those and we'll know that you're wanting to talk. So it looks like Jocelyn's going to do that method. All right. I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my questions, and thanks for your work, everybody. So I own a dance studio in Chaska, and there are many dance studio owners that have been meeting over the last several months. And people kind of have questions in general if we're considered youth programming and youth sports, or if we're considered a gym. And so I know in the state of Minnesota, you know, when we think of the high school dance teams and the kids touching each other and a lot of really kind of heavy activity, that's kind of one way to look at dance. But as a dance studio owner, we have lots of younger classes where the kids will be doing ballet or tap. And, you know, I guess we're thinking that we could safely socially distance without a lot of heavy breathing, without touching. And if we weren't doing, you know, formations where we were exchanging places with people, and if we kind of found our station in the room and we measured that out, kind of looking for some guidelines if we're being considered a gym where lots of people can come and go versus a youth program where we would know exactly who's in our building, how long they're there, when they're leaving, and we could actually set up our schedules so that we would have less children than maybe we normally would have. So I'm not looking to open tomorrow or anything like that. I'm thinking mid-June that, you know, would we be able to have private or semi-private lessons indoors? And do you see that we're considered in the youth sports category in that we might be able to have less than 10 in our yard for like a yard class? So those are kind of my questions. Which category, I guess, are we in? Are we in youth sports or are we in gym? Thanks for your help.
As I know, just the way that we've kind of been looking at things thus far, it's really been based on, you know, for example, there's a lot of chiropractors who also offer massage or other personal care services. It's all, you know, sort of a medical procedure, but it's also a personal care service. The way that we've kind of looked at it is really just that percentage of what the work is. You know, so if you are primarily, you know, in that example, primarily a personal care service organization, they had a harder time being considered a critical service. So I think for you going forward, looking at exactly what percentage of the work that you're doing is could fall under that youth services and what percentage falls under more of that gym category, that would be a helpful way as more guidelines roll out for reopening. Of how that would fit. And I would say too, one direction that we've given lately is to really work within your city. So that was so obviously this is great that we're on the call with the city today, to kind of work with them to make sure that, you know, if they're feeling like you're keeping the residents safe, that's easier than having to go all the way up to us at the state, and we trust our cities to make these decisions.
And so who would I speak to about that then, or?
I think for now, we just need to wait a little bit because obviously neither one of those was really clearly outlined for past June 1. I know there's some conflicting information regarding youth programming for, you know, I believe the DNR had some information that was different from what we put out, for example. So I think for the moment, we need to, you know, kind of, I hate saying be patient, but I think hopefully within the next week or so we'll see a little bit more about what can be open beyond, you know, what was announced yesterday, and then just keep that in the mind is just say what percent am I doing, how would I keep these folks safe, and then going forward, I don't know if Nate or Kevin or who within the city would be part of that.
So we do have a plan, and we kind of know how we would, you know, rotate kids, making sure that it's the same groups that stay together, less than 10. You know, I mean, we have a plan that we're ready to go with. We're just trying to learn if we're in the youth group or the gym category. Several of the owners throughout the state have written to their senators, and they've been told both. You know, they've been told, yes, you can go ahead and slowly turn the dial. You can have private lessons and semi-privates. And other people in the government have responded to studio owners and said, absolutely not. You're a gym. You can't do anything yet. So I just want to do what's right. Again, I don't think we should be opening tomorrow. We actually, for our recital, we're going to have a drive-in. We're going to show a movie of the kids that we recorded on Zoom, one class at a time, maximum 10 cars in the grass. hand their trophies in through the window with our masks on, and away they drive. So, I mean, that's what we've, come up with for, our recital. And so I'm not even thinking about summer programming until June 20th. But June 20th, I'm kind of wanting to say to people, okay, we're set up on Zoom, but we might periodically be able to have some yard classes if it's a nice day, or can't we? So that's kind of where I'm at. And can we do a private lesson? I've done a lot of research on, the slipstream, and if you're following another dancer, you should have 16 meters, not just 6 feet, social distancing, So I'm very aware of all of, those kinds of parameters. And so just kind of thinking about, if we were to do a private lesson, you keep like the 10 or 12 feet from your person, like they're doing with Timberwolves, right? So they can go in today, they can start practicing indoors one at a time. Coach keeps 12 feet away. My guess is, that professional athlete's probably going to have a heavier workout than what I'm going to be doing with my 10-year-old in my classroom. So is that safe? Again, just wanting to keep my family safe, wanting people to feel safe that they can come back to my building, and so wanting to, respect which category is it that we fall into. So.
Yeah, at this time, I think maybe if we can just wait, I don't know if it'll be another week or 2 weeks when they're going to give more guidance on gyms, for example, and then if it's kind of looking the same, where, gym and youth program have those similar guidances, or is guidance is even a word, I'm not sure, that might be a better time to assess under which bucket you would be categorized. Because, Elise and I were on a call earlier today where we had a business that was part yoga studio, part juice bar, part grocer. They are all over the board in terms of where they sit in that critical nature. So there's quite a few businesses out there who are struggling with that same question. And unfortunately, at this time, we're just trying to get the low-hanging fruit figured out. And I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you today.
No, I appreciate it. I know, I guess they haven't addressed us at all this whole time. And we've been really patient and will continue to be. But right now, those two groups, those two categories, youth sports and gyms, are in very different places with how they're being treated. So literally, if I was under youth sports, I could be having less than 10 in my yard today. Well, June 1st, right? But if I'm a gym, I'm not till phase 3, which could be much later in the summer. So who is it at the city that I would interface with in another week or 2?
Well, so I'm typically the contact for businesses at the city. So, I'm happy to help you. At this point, the city has not viewed itself as the enforcer of the state's guidelines and rules on these things. And so, I can try to help you think through questions and provide you resources and things like that. But we're not taking the position that we're going to tell businesses what bucket they fall in or don't. And so I guess, from my perspective, if you feel that, your business is aimed towards, youth and an athletic thing, and, I guess my thing would be, sounds like a youth sport to me, but, we're not making the guidelines. We're not providing the details behind them. And therefore we don't really feel like we're in a good position to be enforcing things. We are in a position to help, provide resources and help, direct you to people who can help answer your questions. But at the end of the day, I guess my perspective would be, for you to make a determination on how you feel that your business fits within those guidelines that are out there. And then we would encourage you to, put in safe practices to the extent that you can. To me, it sounds like you have a pretty well thought through plan there. So, we're not sending our police officers around to, ask questions or shut people down or do anything like that.
But wanting to be a thoughtful community member,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure. So I'm going to send out an email, which I've been doing, kind of every other week to our families that participate at our studio. So are you comfortable if I were to send out an email that said, currently we're doing this drive-through, drive-in movie recital, and that's the week of June 15th. And then after that, as we look to summer programming, we're planning on being on Zoom. However, as we're able to, we would anticipate that through the summer, we would be able to move the dial to private and semi-private lessons and smaller classes. And then the question is, would that be in the yard or in the building? So am I safe in sending that email tonight?
Yeah, you can always send me an email, no doubt. So.
And I think that's appropriately hedged. I mean, none of us have the exact answer right now, and your wording there was as we can and when we know. So that I think that makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing you're saying is causing me great alarm. I'll say that. I've got another question here from Jennifer, and I'm probably going to botch your last name here, and I'm sorry for that. I think it's Fowler or Failer maybe.
It's a long A, thank you.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's Failer.
Failer, okay, all right. So Jennifer is the owner of Good and Twisted Yoga. She's asking what's the appropriate way to reserve a park space for summer yoga in the park for your business. I would recommend the person who does reservations for park spaces is named Jamie Weeman, and she works in our Parks and Rec department. And maybe what I'll do here, Jennifer, is I'll put her email address into the comments so that you have that. It's
Okay, perfect.
JWIEMAN @ChaskaMN.com. And you can contact her and work with her on trying to reserve a space for that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Nate. This is Krista Fleming with Chaska Mill.
Hey, Krista. How are you doing?
I'm good. Say thanks again for all this. I think it's great to be able to connect with people that can answer some of these questions. One question I have is regards to the restaurants that are opening. Everything is outdoor only. What are the requirements for using indoor restrooms? Are they required to provide that? Are they not allowed to provide that? How does that work?
I can jump in here a little bit. There is guidance that your patrons are allowed to use the restrooms. They are encouraged to wear a mask, when going through spaces, going to that restroom. Obviously, you're not going to be able to wear that mask when you're eating your meal, but the guidance is that it is acceptable to use those. We would encourage that restaurant to have obviously a safety plan and to describe how they will keep that restroom sanitized for folks when they're using it. But that is something that is allowed. And, we also understand that some restaurants, you have to walk through the restaurant to get to the outdoor space. So again, that is allowable, and we just would recommend folks wearing a mask to walk through that space.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I saw Greg Anderson had some clappy hands flash there. I don't know if he was impressed with my answer before or wanting to talk. Greg, are you wanting to talk?
Yeah, Nate.
All right. I knew I wasn't that impressive with that answer. So
I was trying to keep my video off, both to keep the glare from my bald head out of your eyes and try to not use as much bandwidth. But
well, you're just sort of showing off that you have the ability to haircut right now.
Yeah, we're the quarantine haircuts with the cattle clippers at our place. Right. My question's for Kyle. Is there any discussion at the state level about coming up with some type of metric that people can use from an evaluation standpoint? In other words, let's say, there was a blog post I forwarded to Nate and a couple other people, and there was like, let's say a 1 is you're hermetically sealed in your home and food comes and you never leave and it comes outside in a box. And then maybe 5 is this is some kind of hoax and, I'm not changing my lifestyle one bit. And so that whether it's a potential customer or a business could evaluate where that person is and then be able to meet them where they are, or conversely, without judgment. In other words, this is where, somebody is a critical worker, for example, and they have to go out every day. So their exposure risk is significantly higher than, a lot of the people that can work at home all the time. And then, so you try to at least evaluate where someone is, and then be able to, and then apply some type of judgment about whether you want to engage, because if you have someone in your household, for example, who has is going through chemo, you might not choose to engage at that level. It strikes me that if we don't have at least a common language about where people are with respect to their personal risk tolerance, both as a customer and as a business owner, that there's going to be a lot of tension if that conversation takes place, for example, at the entry at Dolce Vita. If you walk in there. And it also strikes me that people who are maybe a little more cavalier about their attitude around the disease are maybe going to roll their eyes if they walk in and Dan has a mask on. But the opposite of that is if they have a mask on and he doesn't, they're going to feel like that was some type of a boundary violation, or something without consent. I go out hiking every morning with my dog, and I'm on the trail, and so when I meet people, I try to get off to the side, and it seems to work okay. But what I've noticed is, if I'm walking on the trail and someone rides by me on a bicycle with a passing distance where if I lifted my elbow, I could take them off like like in a Jason Bourne movie, when they go by, I feel frustrated because I didn't consent to them to get into my bubble. Does that make sense? And without some type of a metric where you could evaluate where people are, it's hard to make a decision. And without that, I think there's going to be an awful lot of conflict. I mean, you've got people right now saying, if Costco makes me wear a mask, I'm not going to go to Costco. And that's certainly their prerogative. It'd be easier if they knew that, as if there was some type of a standard, like, Costco is a number 2, right? Here's what their operating criteria is. And, but someplace else, I went to Home Depot yesterday. The parking lot was full, maybe 15, 20% tops of the people were wearing masks. And if somebody knew that that's Home Depot standard, you could choose to go to Menards, where they won't let you in the door without a mask. But without some kind of a benchmark where people know, that they could evaluate risk tolerance, I think we're just going to create a situation where there's going to be a lot of confrontation. And sorry, that was a long explanation, but does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I'll give you a short answer first, followed by a long one. How's that? The short answer is no. That is not really something that we're considering. It's something that is kind of being looked at more in the contact tracing conversation. So, as we're looking at, as you said, it's kind of each person's prerogative to determine how much risk they feel safe taking on. But if that is a person who's being recalled to work, for example, and they're nervous that, they can't do their work from home, they need to go to this space, what happens if somebody in that space contracts the virus? So that is where, Health and Human Services would get involved with, OSHA, for example, to do contact tracing, and potentially who has been exposed, where that person may have been. This is a difficult disease to really pin down in terms of where somebody got it specifically, given that 5-day, minimum incubation period. But I think that there is certainly a desire to obviously keep people as healthy and safe as possible, but we can't be that, heavy hand of government telling people that you can't go into that business because, you went hiking with a group of friends or something like that. Like, we don't have that ability, but there is certainly a hope that residents and individuals are thinking about that sort of moral hazard of, I did this thing for me, but does that mean that I should put other people at risk? But at this time, we just don't really have a way of enforcing that with private business, for example.
I wasn't suggesting an enforcement. I was just suggesting a labeling. If there's a metric that people can use, that they can choose to use or not, but at least there's some sort of foundational understanding of where people can assign themselves risk, not mandating that you can't go into a store if you're that way. That's the store's prerogative.
Yeah.
If I can not bake a cake for somebody, I could decide whether they can come into my store with a mask on or not. Yeah. What I'm saying is that that's the business's prerogative, but without some way of labeling where, or having people either self-identify where they are from a risk tolerance standpoint, how is a business person supposed to make that determination about whether or not, they would do business with them? And without, violating. In this article that I'd sent to Nate, it talks about consent and boundaries and consent. Mm-hmm. So you can violate someone's, boundaries and consent without any ill intent, just because you don't know where they are. And so if there was some kind of a way that people could sort of kind of go, okay, I have some kind of a rubric for how I self-identify. There's no judgment on that. But conversely, I have to make some type of judgment as a business person or as a consumer about how I choose to engage with them or not.
If I could jump in here, Greg, for restaurants, bars, and businesses that are open under the emergency order, the state is now mandating that we have a COVID-19 preparedness plan that we communicate with employees on that plan. And it doesn't sound like they're actively enforcing it, but we're supposed to have it just the same. And it seems to me that, most of the retail or the businesses I deal with that are open communicate their level of preparedness either in their email communication or on their website or when you walk in the door and you see signs. This kind of a preparedness plan is certainly something you could ask to see.
I have one. I mean, we just spent.
Hey guys, I've got a question here from Paul Maz, who needs to jump off, and I've got a couple things to add to what Greg and Dan is going. So I don't need to.
No worries.
The dialogue, but I do want to get
Thanks,
Paul the opportunity to have his question out.
Get a haircut, Paul.
Paul is asking whether DEED has a seat at the table with the governor when guidelines and rules are being put together.
Yes. You probably will see our commissioner, Steve Grove, is usually by the governor's side when he does his announcements, whether that's weekly or whatever the case may be. So yes, we are very much engaged with the governor, with the business community. That's definitely a role that we're playing.
Can I just add, I believe it's still on DEED's website that if you have suggestions, they were taking suggestions on how, businesses that have either done this or have been thinking about it can go and submit those particular best practices or whatever it might be, so that can be into the consideration.
Yes, that is true.
So thanks, Kylle, for that. I keep seeing Jordan on your.
I know, I have it as K Jordan. I should
Yeah, I just want to keep calling you Jordan, so I'm sorry about that. Back to the discussion that Greg and Dan were going into. There's a couple of things I just want to mention that we at the city have talked about that may get to some of the points that you're raising, Greg. One of them is Elise and I, and I'm currently the roadblock on getting this out, so I'll acknowledge that. But we've been working on getting a survey together that would be put out countywide, and so on behalf of the CDA, to ask questions of potential customers of businesses. So I guess really anyone who lives in the community, but to ask questions that get to the point, the general theme of as things open up, are you ready to come back? Are you now, or is it 6 months from now, or what's that timeline that you think you're going to feel comfortable and starting to come back to businesses? And then when you do, or if you do, what are the practices that you're going to be looking for that's going to make you feel safe entering, these business places? And it's way more than 2 questions in the survey, but that's kind of the general theme that's overarching the questions that are in there. And I think that can be, helpful to provide some perspective and information to business owners who are trying to make decisions about how far do I take it, how much do I need to be implementing, because there's a cost to that as well. And so thinking about, my clientele and the feedback, hopefully this survey helps to provide some better information for people to make evaluations of the decisions that they're making as they're preparing to reopen. Now, the other thing that we've talked about is, is there an appetite, I guess, out in the community or in the business community that maybe we would do some sort of a sticker or window cling of some of the primary practices that you see, right? Like mask wearing, regular cleaning, promoting social distancing when in lines. And maybe, those are items that are on that graphic that you could hang in your window and you sort of check the box. Yes, we're doing ... And I don't know exactly what that would look like. That's sort of a half-baked idea at this point. But I think if people see enough, if there's enough interest out there in trying to develop that, we would be, behind trying to pull something like that together.
A COVID version of a no shirt, no shoes, no service kind of
sort
thing.
of, yeah. And it may be, there's expectations of the customer on one end, and there's also communicating to the customer, what they can expect when they enter the door. So, maybe, I don't know if it's a combination of those things or, where that focus ends up lying. But I like to tell people I don't run a business. I have no idea what it takes because I haven't done that, but I'm always happy to help, foster communication and access resources, bring people together to think through ideas. If that's something that resonates, I'd be happy to play a role in that.
I want to add one other thing, since we're kind of all on this line. One thing I heard on one of my calls this morning was from Steve Kylle, the Commissioner of Commerce here at the state. He mentioned running things by your insurance company to really, as you're thinking about, what guidelines you're going to put into your preparedness plan and that sort of thing, run that by your insurance company to make sure that you have those particular practices in place that line up with what your insurance is covering. And I thought that was a good piece of advice that I wanted to make sure got shared, that if you haven't talked with your insurance company already, that to make that probably a good stop here somewhere along the lines.
Mm-hmm. I saw Jennifer Failer put up her clappy hands, so I don't know if that meant you wanted to ask another question. Go ahead.
My clappy hands are just saying I like the idea of the common business decal that we could all have for safe practices. So it was actually a clap for you.
All right. Wow.
You're welcome.
Make that assumption. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other folks who have questions? We've got about 10 minutes here till we get to 3 o'clock, which is the advertised end. Doesn't have to be a hard stop though.
Well, I just quickly wanted to note too on those safety plans. While no one is out there, checking boxes to make sure that each business has one hanging in the break room or whatever the case may be, we certainly are hearing, whether it's from, that insurance piece that Elise was just talking about, that these are very useful, and more than that, it's really allowing employees to feel more comfortable returning to work. I mean, I can tell you, my mom got called back into work, she's supposed to work this Sunday, and I said, okay, well, what's their safety plan? And she says, well, apparently I'm supposed to wear a mask and some gloves, and they put some tape on the floor for where people can stand at the register. I said, do you feel safe? And she says, no. I said, well, then you don't have to go back. You can tell them that they need to have more to that plan. So that's really the point of these is just making sure that people feel safe walking into your business, or your employees feel safe working there. It's less about the state making sure that you have it and enforcing it, and more about just providing that safe location for people to join you.
Andy, I see you're on here, Andy Mooney. I don't want to out you or anything, but we had a pretty good conversation earlier today where you were asking all sorts of stuff of me. I don't know if you want to bring any of that here. If you don't, that's okay. And I see Greg just put out some clappy hands, so I don't know if he's got another question as well.
Actually, I do. We've been open. I have a real estate office, so we've been open. We have the door locked. The issue isn't whether we're really small, and my people feel safe until customers come in. And it's the customers' cavalier attitude that creates angst with my people, not our policies. There's a ton of information available from the state. We've got flyers everywhere. We've got stuff on the windows. We've got hand sanitizers in the front. But it's people coming in going, this is BS, blah, 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 that just happened yesterday. Some guy's like, this is BS. Do you know how much money the adult care facilities get if they call the person COVID? They're 100 years old and rah, 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 and they're just kind of going down in these rabbit holes. And that sort of ideological perspective shifts them away from the fact that this is still a public health issue, or this is some kind of loss of freedom or loss of choice. I mean, we try to, in a nice way, say, look, you eat 5 double cheeseburgers and you have that creates a health issue. That's fine. Me sitting across from the table with you I'm not taking that health issue back to my family. And that's where we've been having the issue. It's more about for us, it's more about gauging where our customers are. And so that we can either meet them at a level of safety that they're comfortable with, or frankly, choosing not to engage with somebody who is that our agents feel is going to put them at risk. That's really been more of our challenge, frankly, in Carver County than, people not feeling, our staff not feeling safe, or our team not feeling safe. Mm-hmm. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and that is exactly the struggle, and that I was sort of flippantly calling it the no shirt, no shoes, no service version. But I mean, if there is something on the door, that says, no service without a mask, I mean, I don't know if that's particularly enforceable, but I mean, it is something for folks to be able to point to and say that is our policy here. I recognize that, that certainly doesn't necessitate a positive conversation. I mean, look at some of these folks who are acting in security roles in places like Flint, who were shot for asking for someone to wear a mask. So we recognize that it's not, tell people to do something and they'll do it. It's a very difficult situation, and we're trying our best to make sure that these guidelines are out there so that people know that they're important to follow, but there will always be those folks, and that is something that unfortunately I think each business owner will have to enforce their own policies when folks are walking in the door.
One thing I want to touch on before we need to wrap up here is does that mean you have a question, Greg, or you appreciate that? Okay, you're good to go. All right. Is in reaction to the governor's guidelines that were talked about yesterday? Was it yesterday? Yeah. Yesterday. Each day feels like a year to me recently, it feels. So yesterday, providing, I guess, more ability for restaurants to do things outdoors, at least, but delaying their ability to do things indoors for now. One of the things that we're going to be looking at as a city is taking a look at the outdoor space that the city has control over. And so that would be parks and right-of-way and parking lots to some extent, downtown in particular. And is there an opportunity for those spaces to be used by restaurants, and what could that look like? And I don't have answers to that right now, but I do want folks to know that those are questions that are rattling in our heads, and we're going to try to be working on to provide opportunities for at least restaurants to take advantage of that, since they have to be working in an outdoor space now if they're going to be doing that. So if folks have ideas about that, we're all ears. We're trying to work through that, and what would be useful. Again, like I said before, I'm not a business owner, and I'm certainly not a restaurateur. So it'd be helpful to get perspective from anybody who wants to offer that up to that side.
Nate, I'd like to offer some perspective on that. When I read the governor's orders relative to restaurants and thought about the restaurants that currently exist in Chaska, conclusion I came to is effectively they are still closed, because really, even a 25% or a 50% capacity order would still not be a viable situation for most of them. So the way I'm looking at it is, for now, restaurants effectively are still closed.
Yeah, and that may be, I think, I think it's going to be a struggle for many folks to work within, that opportunity. Most of our restaurants, I think, interestingly enough, I can only think of a couple that have fully closed right now. Most of them are doing takeout and delivery to some extent. But yeah, whether they decide to go further than what they have been doing in that regard, I think that remains to be seen. And then really ultimately, I guess it's their thing to try and figure out whether there's benefit in going beyond what they're currently doing. But if people see an opportunity in trying to use public space, we're thinking through how could that look and how might that happen. One idea that I've sort of been floating out there is, at minimum, maybe do we use like City Square Park, for example, to create sort of an outdoor food court type of a scenario, where maybe we put out some of our city picnic tables and try to, distance them appropriately, and put like a table tent type concept on there, or, like those topper advertisers that might have a list of the restaurants and their phone numbers. And if they're delivering, maybe they can deliver to the park and people can kind of coalesce around that a little bit, or it's within walking distance of really all the restaurants that are downtown. So you get your takeout, enjoy some outside space, and we can try to promote access to the restaurants in that way. So that's one idea that we've thought about, but we're also going to be taking a look at some other things if there's opportunities to be had, or at least put out there for people to take advantage of. One other thing, I guess, is last time in the last business roundtable that we held, people identified a lot of questions and things that they wanted more information about, and that was really what drove the topic for this one. I'd like to just toss out if people have any, thoughts about what they'd like to see, or even if they would like to see another one. Maybe that's the first question, and if so, what would be some things that you're looking at trying to get information about that we could try and prepare, maybe focus our keynote speaker on that topic.
Nate, is it possible to hear from how would I've heard conflicting things about how to support restaurants. Obviously the takeout makes sense. The other part is gift cards, but then I heard an interview with a restaurant owner saying that's not a great scenario because they're going to be redeemed when they're trying to get back, operational. They've got this basically as a debit going forward. And so if there are restaurants, if there's it kind of goes to like the resilience group that's kind of started up, is there's a specific ask. And so like, for example, in Andy's case, if he'd say, this is how you can support me during this time, and maybe going around to some of the other restaurants, that would be really useful.
Okay. Yeah, no, I see Andy's got his hand up. Looks like, okay, Kylle had to leave. So just thanks to Kylle, even though she can't hear us right now, but she did have to leave. Andy had his hand up. So Andy, if you want to, I can unmute you.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Sounds good. So a couple things. Greg, you're bringing up a point of, this is very divisive time dealing with everything we're dealing with. And at what point do we put up a sign that says enter at your own risk? That's sort of what that is saying to the public. We've been open this whole time. We've had lines out the door. People are trusting us. And I think that's sort of what we have to put into the customer's hands and the consumer's hands is, do you trust your business owners or do you not? And I think that's sort of the deciding line where everything's going to be. People trust us. Do they trust every other business? They seem to trust Dan. He's doing really well, how he's handling everything over at Dolce Vita. So that's one of the things I want to talk about, because you can wear masks, you can do all this stuff, but do they trust you to do the right things?
Mm-hmm.
I trust you. I just don't necessarily trust the knucklehead standing in line next to me.
And true, and that is a divisive thing too, because you get people that are coming in, and I understand there are people that go, this is fake, this is phony. I know people who think that way, but we can't control the general public. And should we say, I mean, where is this going to end up going? Is it going to end up somebody's going to wear a vest, and if they're wearing a yellow vest, that you have to stay 5 feet away from them, 6 feet away, whatever. So where is that breaking point?
I don't know, but nobody's having that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps maybe I'll just add, Nate mentioned this community survey that he and I have been talking a little bit about, and that might be able to provide, when we get that completed, maybe those results might be able to provide you some additional feedback as business owners, and what you kind of where the public is standing, where the community is standing as far as trust level, what they want to see, how long it might take them to get back into your business, depending upon the type of business. So I think some of that, relates to, what Andy and Greg are talking about in that particular discussion. So we could certainly do a roundtable based upon those survey results and what they mean, if that would be of interest to the group.
One of the things also, during this whole time, we talked about people coming in. If we don't have customers, you're going to start losing businesses at a very dramatic rate. Like, we're already losing restaurants over the Twin Cities, and this is just the beginning. I know at least a couple dozen that are probably going to be announcing it within the next couple weeks because they can't make it work. How far are we willing to go? I understand public safety is huge, but people's lives are on the line, for their family, their livelihood. Like, we're going to lose so many businesses in this whole thing. Where's the breaking point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point. And that's the question that, I'm seeing, consistently raised right now. What's that balance point? And that's sort of the trick that people are trying to identify and understand. Unfortunately, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. And but I think that's, from the city's perspective, where we want to try and provide as much, support and assistance as possible. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of influence on the timing of, what the governor's decisions are making and that kind of thing. But, I think one thing that we can do is we are in pretty regular communication with our state elected officials, at least the ones that represent our area. We can continue to reflect, the concerns and the things that you all are confronting. I think they're probably hearing that as well, but it doesn't hurt to continue to voice those concerns and pass on those messages and keep that conversation. Are there any other questions or thoughts before we wrap this up? Oh, I see Jennifer just provided a message. She says she'd join the meeting again. She's interested in any community survey results for the future roundtable. So maybe that'll be one of the things, at least, that we bring to the table next time. Also, this is one where I was hoping to have some of our elected officials involved and maybe provide an opportunity for dialogue with them. Unfortunately, and this isn't anything that Kylle controls, but she doesn't have that authority to be able to present to either the press or elected officials, and that's a department policy that she's under. So I needed to ask the elected officials to join us another time, and I think that might be an opportunity for the next one to see if we can get some of those folks to join us and have some conversations with them as well. So I'll leave that out there. So with that, I guess I'm not seeing any other people looking to ask questions or put anything else out. And so we'll bring this to an end, but I do appreciate everyone who joined. And I think we will, it seems like there's enough interest that we'll try and organize another one of these within the next few weeks. So we'll be in touch with you to get you that information when it's available. Feel free to send me an email if you have any other thoughts or things that you want to get in front of the city. Happy to hear from you all. So with that, thanks for joining, and we'll see you again soon.